Getting a sound test going. Getting ready to start the stream. Waiting for Beam to start up. Let me see here real quick. I heard a noise somewhere. Let me see what's going on here. All right. Okay. I can hear my voice. D-Live is good. Gotta hit refresh on Twitch. I think I heard my voice on there. Yep, sounds good. Sounds good on Kick. YouTube is up. YouTube sounds good. Let me go on to Rumble real quick. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay. Sounds good on Rumble. Now I have to test the audio on BeamStream. Sometimes it pops up straight up. Sometimes it doesn't. It sounds good though. So we are ready to go. Now today is another episode of Strange Stories. Now I thought this was the final episode, but apparently I was wrong. So let me go ahead and double check before I get going, because I really did want to find out for sure. Now, Strange Stories playlist is different than the live ones. Yeah. So let me come in here and find out real quick before I start talking, because I don't really know for sure if this is the second to the last episode or if it's the actual last one. So let me find out real quick. I don't have them numbered on a Wonderful World of Weirdness, but I believe this is the second to the last one. I'm pretty sure of it, actually. So let me go ahead and back out of it, and we will get on with the show. So the topic today is kind of unorganized, to be honest with you. Like I said, I had a mix-up. I thought that this was going to be the last episode, but apparently, according to my files, I still have 2 more to go. So with that in mind, I came up with a impromptu topic. I was sitting and wondering what would be a good topic to bring up. So just out of nowhere, I realized, I'm doing research for an upcoming video series that I'm going to do on another channel, and it has a perfect story for Strange Stories that I could do. Here before long, I will be bringing up the topic of Moloch, and there's a lot of good stuff that I can pull out of that. So with that, I figured, I can go ahead and do that. Um, so, well, actually, this right here says this is my last episode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's one missing though in here. So let me see here. Okay, so we have, yeah, 12 is missing. Okay. So apparently episode 12 is not on here. So that is something that I did. So what I can do is I can stop on going into my topic is today and kind of go over some of the stuff that I was going to do, because this was supposed to be my review of the year. So let me go ahead and get this muted out, and I will be back here in a minute. I'll put some music on for you to listen to. Okay, I am back. So, what I wanted to do was go through and do a review and everything. But, since I already wanted to do this, I might as well, instead of doing a last review video like I usually do, I'm going to go ahead and do this topic, my last strange story. Um, since I already put it out there, I'll go ahead and do that. So, with that, let me go quiet real quick, and then I will start the episode. I didn't realize what time it was either. So, here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Strange Stories here on the wonderful world of weirdness and also strangeness on my original channel, which is Strange Stories. Today, I will be discussing the last strange story for this season of Strange Stories slash Strangeness. And at first, I was wanting to do a review video for the final episode, but got a little bit confused there, so I decided that I needed to come up with a topic because I apparently lost my copy of episode 12 that I had done. And when I counted the videos in my computer or my video file, I only counted 10. So I thought there was 2 more left to go. So I pulled together a promptu topic because of stuff that I've been doing research on. And I didn't want to do that for that entire topic for this episode. What I wanted to do was pull something out of that and then use that on a later episode of a new stream that I'm going to be putting out called Untethered. So later on, you can learn more about what I'm going to be discussing in this video. So I apologize for not doing my review video if anybody really wanted to see or hear that, but instead I hope this is just as interesting, if not worth discussing instead of doing a review video. Now, this topic is something that has always been very, very controversial, and it's a very strange story when it comes to theology and history and everything, especially for Christians. The topic of it for today is going to be Gehenna or Gehene. Now, Gina is another way of saying it. If it's a Romanized way of saying it. But this is eventually what was translated into what we call hell today. And I thought that would be the best way to end this season, considering that my first couple of streams was about Mount Fuji and the Suicide Forest. So I was sitting there doing my research, and I was like, I could use this as a topic. And so that's what I decided to do. That's what it's going to be. Now, Gehenna is also called Valley of Hinnom, and it's a biblical toponym that has been acquired that has acquired like various theological connotations, including as a place of divine punishment in Jewish eschatology. Now, the place is first mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as part of the border between the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and you can find that in Joshua 15:8. During the late First Temple period, it was the site of the Tophet, which is actually a location which is within the Valley of Hinnom. Okay, where what took place here is some of the kings of Judah were supposed to have sacrificed their children by fire, and you can find that in Jeremiah 7:31. Therefore, it was cursed by the biblical prophet Jeremiah, and that's Jeremiah 19:2-6, if you guys are interested. Now, in later rabbinical literature, Gehenna became associated with divine punishment as the destination of the wicked for the atonement of their sins. The term is different from the more neutral term Sheol, which is spelled Sheol, the abode of the dead. Now, the King James Version of the Bible translates both with the Anglo-Saxon word hell. Okay, so that's where it comes from. It translates both of those words as hell. Now, the Hebrew Bible refers to the valley as the Valley of the Son of Hinnom, which is Hebrew, or Valley of Hinnom. Now, in Mishnaic Hebrew and Judaic Aramaic languages, the names was contracted into Gehinnom or Gehinnom, meaning hell. The name Gehenna derives from the Koine Greek translation found in the New Testament. Now, the exact location of the Valley of Hinnom is disputed. George Adam Smith wrote in 1907 that there were three possible locations considered by historical writers. That would be east of the Old City, today identified as the Valley of Josaphat. And there's also one within the Old City, today identified as the Tyropian Valley. Now, many commentaries gave the location as below the southern wall of ancient Jerusalem, stretching from the foot of Mount Zion eastward past the Tyropoeum Valley to the Kidron Valley. However, the Tyropoean Valley is usually no longer associated with the Valley of Hinnom because during the period of Ahaz in Manasseh, the Tyropoean lay within the city walls, and child sacrifices would have been practiced outside the walls of the city. And yes, just so you know, there is beliefs that human or child sacrifices took place there. And this gets us into what I'm later going to be talking about on my new stream, which was going to be on another channel that I have called The Praetorian, which you can find on both YouTube as well as Rumble. Hopefully, if I get accepted soon, I will be monetized on Rumble. So if you guys want to help support the channel, please go over to Rumble and check out the video, give comments, likes, and stuff of that nature. That's on both this one and possibly the one that's coming up if I'm accepted. I'm still getting monetized through regular Rumble, but with this one, it's through Rumble Studios, where I had to become a Rumble Premium member in order to get it, and then I had to stream 5 hours before I applied for the monetization for Rumble Studios. But if things work out, which I hope they do, there shouldn't be no problems. But if things work out, then I will be able to officially be monetized on Rumble. And that might be helpful for anybody who is on YouTube wanting to be monetized and tired of waiting for the 1,000 subscriber requirement. I only had to have a combined followership of 100 subscribers, and the payouts happen at $50. So instead of 100 like most of these places do, and you get paid out through PayPal, so you don't have to go through Stripe. If you get the PayPal card, which I have, debit card, you can just get it done that way. You don't have to worry about Stripe. So let me go back to this now, since I did my host spiel, my advertisement, and I told you about that. If you want to check out my stream, it's going to be about Moloch. It's going to be on my new stream for the Praetorian, and it will be called Untethered. Now, this isn't going to be just about theology or anything like that. It's going to be a variety of different topics. But if you guys want to check that out, you can check it out later. But today, it's about Gehenna. So let me get back to that. The name Gehenna derives from the Koine Greek translation found in the New Testament. Now, like I said, the exact location of the Valley of Hinnom is disputed. George Adam Smith wrote in 1907 that there are three possible locations considered by historical writers. East of the Old City, today identified as the Valley of Josaphat. Then within the Old City, today identified as Tyropoean Valley. Many commentators gave the location as below the south wall of ancient Jerusalem, stretching from the foot of Mount Zion onward past the Tyropoeon Valley to the Kidron Valley. However, the Tyropoeon Valley is usually no longer associated with the Valley of Hinnom because during the period of Ahaz and Manasseh, the Tyropoeon lay within the walls, and child sacrifice would have been practiced outside the walls of the city. After that, you have the Wadi Arababi Dolmen, 1930, and Bailey in 1986, and Watson in 1992 identified the Wadi al-Rababi, which fits the description of Joshua, that the Hinnom Valley ran east to west and lay outside the city walls. According to Joshua, the valley began at Ein Rogel. If the modern Bur Ayyab in Silwan is Ein Rogel, then Wadi Arababi, which begins there, is Hinnom. Now, child sacrifice at other Tophets contemporary with the Bible accounts, which is between 700 and 600 BCE, of the okay, let me start over. Child sacrifices at other Tophets contemporary with Bible accounts of the reign of Ahaz and Manasseh has been established, such as the bones of children sacrificed at the Tophet to the goddess Tanit in Phoenician Carthage, and also child sacrifice in ancient Syria, Palestine. Scholars such as Mosca in 1975 has concluded that the sacrifice recorded in the Hebrew Bible, such as Jeremiah's comment that the worshippers of Baal had filled this place with the blood of innocent, is literal. Yet the biblical words in the Bible of Jeremiah describe events taking place in the 7th century in the place of Ben Hinnom, because they, the Israelites, have forsaken me and have made this an alien place and have burned sacrifices in it to other gods, that neither they nor their forefathers nor the kings of Judah had ever known. And because they had filled this place with the blood of the innocent and have built the high places of Baal or Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, a thing which I never commanded or spoke of, nor did never did enter my mind. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place no longer be called, when this place will no longer be called Tophet or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but rather the valley of slaughter. J. Hyder and Mosca believe that the Moloch cult took place in the valley of Hinnom at the Tophet. Now, I do have a lot of information on this. I'm reading this, and I will tell you right now that most of this that is written is inaccurate, and later on, as when I do my next episode, I'll explore that a little bit more. These translations aren't what the Bible says. So just keep that in mind for later on if you want to check it out and we can talk about it. Like I said, I didn't want to make this the topic of today's show, It is going to be on later on, but this is kind of what I'll be getting into later on, okay? But just so you know, a lot of this that was written down is completely inaccurate. And later on, I can go through this. Hopefully, I can get two other people that I know who are interested in this subject to come on with me, and we can have a conversation about it. So, and just to let everybody know, too, tomorrow I am rescheduling Ancient Mysteries. It's going to be at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Time. And that is because my friend Mr. Robot is going to be on the show too, and we're going to have him come on and discuss the ball cycle, or the bell cycle. And we're going to have a pretty good conversation about that first. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and move on. Actually, let me see how. Yeah, we're doing good. So, I had to check the time. Now, no archaeological evidence such as mass children graves has been found. However, it has been suggested that such a find may be compromised by the heavy population history of the Jerusalem area compared to the Tophet found in Tunisia. The site would have also been disrupted by actions of Josiah, and he defied Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire of Moloch. Now, when it says this, it doesn't say Moloch at all. It says to make his son, well, it doesn't even say daughter. It says to make his sons pass through the fire. And that's all it says. In most of the passages, I will be covering that, but that's another error that I wanted to point out. Now, a minority of scholars have attempted to argue that the Bible does not portray actual child sacrifice, but only dedication to the god by fire. However, they are judged to have been convincingly disproved. And that was Hay in 2011, which is not true. They were not. It's still an ongoing discussion between scholars. As a matter of fact, the wording is it's very much in favor of what they're saying. Like the whole debate is actually, was this actually a deity or was this a ritual when they mention the word Moloch? And a lot of what's being written here so far, from what I'm reading, is just completely and absolutely wrong. So that's something that I do have to mention. I might have to just go ahead and pull out some serious research, because I can't handle the sickening garbage that's being pushed there. Wikipedia sucks. Like I said, this was improv too, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you what I found. This is all according to archaeology, and I've tried my best to put logical, biblical verses in. You know what I'm saying? There's some that a lot of people mix up and they believe was actually related to Moloch, and it really wasn't. Okay, but so let me go ahead and get you some of the information that I found. Now, Moloch, or Molech, which is mentioned multiple times in the Old Testament, often in connection with child sacrifice in pagan worship, is described as a foreign deity worshipped by some Israelites in neighboring cultures, particularly the Ammonites. Now, the worship of Moloch was condemned by Yahweh. and severe punishment was prescribed for those who engaged in his rites. Now, in Leviticus 18:21, it says, "You shall not give any of your children to offer them to Moloch, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." And now it does say Moloch there, okay? Now, this verse explicitly forbids child sacrifice to Moloch. The practice has been seen as a profanity in God's name and a grave sin. Okay? Now, in Leviticus 22 through 5, it says, "Say to the Israelites, any Israelite or any foreigner residing in Israel who sacrifice any of his children to Moloch is to be put to death. The members of the community are to stone him." Now here the death penalty is prescribed for anyone who worships Moloch. Now God warns that he will set his face against those who participate in these rites. Now in Kings 11:7, it says then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Moloch, the abomination of the Amorites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. Now, this passage describes how King Solomon, under the influence of his foreign wives, built places of worship for Moloch. This action is considered part of Solomon's downfall. Now, in 2 Kings 23:10, he desecrated Topeth, which was in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so that no one could use it to sacrifice their son or daughter in the fire to Moloch. Well, it does say Moloch. To Moloch. Okay, this refers to King Josiah's religious reforms where he destroyed sites of Moloch worship to cleanse Israel of idolatry. Now, Topeth is located in the valley of Hinnom, which is Gehenna, which is what I was just talking. And it was a place where children's sacrifices were believed to have taken place. So after that, you go to Jeremiah 32:35, and it says, "They built high places of Baal in the valley of Ben Hinnom to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Moloch, though I never commanded, nor did it enter my mind that they should do such a detestable thing and so make Judah sin." Now, the prophet Jeremiah condemns Judah for practicing child sacrifice and worship of Moloch. God declares that such practices were never his will and calls them an abomination. Moloch was most likely a Canaanite or an Ammonite deity associated with fire and child sacrifice, or who was worshipped in high places and valleys, such as the infamous Valley of Hinnom, also connected to Baal worship, as some biblical texts associate the two. Many scholars believe that Moloch may not be a personal deity, but a title referring to a specific form of sacrifice. So it's either it's a deity or it's a specific form of sacrifice or ritual. Now that goes to MLK, which its meaning is offering in the Semitic language. Now, however, other than that, others argue that he was a distinct god, likely represented by a bronze or metal statue with outstretched arms where infants were placed and burned. And this brings us to Gehenna, which is hell, the valley of Hinnom, where Moloch sacrifices were performed. And that later became a symbol of divine punishment, too. Now, in the New Testament, it is used as a metaphor for hell. So Moloch appears in later literature, such as John Milton's Paradise Lost, where he's depicted as a bloodthirsty demon. Today's Moloch is sometimes used metaphorically to represent systems or titles that demand great, often immoral sacrifices. Just so you guys know, that's how it's actually progressed through time. So after that, Moloch is also considered a significant figure in the Old Testament, representing forbidden worship, child sacrifice, and divine wrath. Now, his cult was a major reason for Yahweh's condemnation of Israel's idolatry, and his legacy remains a potent symbol of corruption and destruction. Now, the mention of Moloch in the Old Testament is debated. Was he an actual deity, or does Moloch refer to a specific type of religious sacrifice? Now, it's hard for people who I talk to about this subject to comprehend that. You know what I mean? It's hard to differentiate between Moloch being an actual deity or being a specific type of ritual for a sacrifice. And that is one thing that I do want to bring out. And you'll find that a lot in a lot of Christians in the way they think about it, and they don't really take a look at the wording in the scriptures about what it actually says. It's not calling Moloch a deity. Now, if you read in the Bible, when they mention deities, they mention deities. You know what I mean? They point blank say this is a deity. You know, Ashtar or whoever. You know what I mean? They're recognized as a deity, but they don't do that when it comes to Moloch. Okay, in the fires to Moloch. Okay, they don't mention that whatsoever. He destroyed sites of Moloch worship. That's another one that's mentioned. You know, he built high places of Baal in the valley of Ben Hanam to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Moloch. You know, things like that. You know, the language isn't calling Moloch a deity. So that's something to take into consideration when you're thinking about this and you're reading through your Bibles. If you're Christians, you know what I mean. Like I said, connected to Baal worship as a biblical text associated the two. Okay. Many scholars believe that Moloch may not be a personal deity, but a title referring to a specific form of sacrifice. That would be MLK, meaning offering in Semitic languages. So, even though that's the case, what I had just said previously, others argue that he was a distinct god, likely represented by a bronze or metal statue with outstretched arms, where infants were placed and burned. Now, Gehenna, which is hell, the valley of Hinnom, is where Moloch sacrifices were supposed to be performed. That later became a symbol of divine punishment. In the New Testament, it is used as a metaphor for hell. Now, Moloch appears in later literature, like I said, which is literature such as John Milton's Paradise Lost, where he's depicted as a bloodthirsty demon. And then, in today's world, Moloch is sometimes used metaphorically to represent like systems or entities that demand great, often immoral sacrifices. Now, and forbidden worships and stuff like that. Um, Now, the mention of Moloch in the Old Testament is debated. Like I said, was he an actual deity, or does Moloch refer to a specific type of ritual sacrifice? Now, the biblical text suggests both possibilities depending on the interpretation. Now, in several passages, Moloch is referred to in a way that suggests he is a foreign god, particularly associated with the Ammonites and Canaanites. And you can find that in 1 Kings 11:7. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Moloch, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. Now, I checked over my references on Chemosh, and the thing about him is that goes into another whole area about divine destruction when it comes to like going into battle and stuff. There were cities where the enemies would go in and they would slaughter everybody. And that was considered divine destruction. And that is something else that I would also be discussing later on whenever I get into this discussion on Untethered. So this is another area when it comes to Chemosh that is going to be discussed, but I'm not going to focus on that one. So here, Moloch is placed alongside Chemosh, a known Moabite god, implying that Moloch was a specific deity. Now, for me, I personally believe that if they were going to sacrifice, if say it was a ritual and it actually was taking place, if they were going to sacrifice do a human sacrifice there, they would also have Moloch there, what they consider Moloch, there as well as Chemosh, because they would have to have a sacrificial place for the human sacrifice as well as their place for Chemosh. So it would make sense to me that they would have both of them there, but that doesn't necessarily say that Moloch was a deity separate from Chemosh, so they would have two separate things for two separate meanings. So in Jeremiah 32:35, they built high places of Baal in the valley of Ben Hinnom to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Moloch. To Moloch. Now, are they saying to Moloch as in a ritual, or are they saying it to a deity? That's the question. Now, the text treats Moloch as a recipient of sacrifice, which suggests God rather than just a ritual. Additionally, later Jewish and Christian traditions, including John Milton's Paradise Lost and medieval demonology, explicitly describe Moloch as a demon god of child sacrifice. Some scholars argue that Moloch might not refer to a god at all, but rather to a specific type of child sacrifice ritual. This theory is based on linguistics analysis. The Semitic root MLK means king, but in sacrificial context, it might have meant something like offering or consecration. In Phoenician and Carthaginian inscriptions, the term MLK appears in sacrificial context, possibly referring to a type of burnt offering. This would mean that phrases like sacrificing to Moloch might actually mean performing the MLK ritual rather than worshiping a specific god. Some historians believe that later biblical writers misunderstood or intentionally demonized this practice by turning Moloch into a full-fledged pagan deity. The middle ground theory suggests that Moloch was originally a ritual, but later became personified as a deity in Israelite religious thought. This happens frequently in mythology. For example, Hades in Greek culture was originally the underworld itself before later becoming a god of the underworld. And also, Santa Junathan also mentions this, and I agree with him on it. Like, there are deities in other religions where this has been done. There's strong evidence, in my opinion, that Thoth was actually a human deified after he brought the written word from Phoenicia down to Egypt. Thoth was originally from Phoenicia, and he traveled to Egypt, where he taught them how to read and write, math and arithmetic, and things of that nature. I just recently gone over that. So yeah, when it comes to that specifically, I do agree with that kind of logic. That does make sense to me. That this kind of stuff was happening. So I think I actually got to a pretty good amount of information in a short time. I just could not sit and read that garbage that was being filled out on this Wikipedia page. This is one reason why I really don't like using Wikipedia, and I do apologize to you guys for doing that. I was just in a rush, and I really didn't have to do today. I could have just gone through and reviewed the past episodes for this season like I wanted to do, but I figured it would be a good idea. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and continue with where I was at now. Over time, these rituals became associated with foreign gods, possibly influenced by the worship of Baal or Kamash. This explains why some texts describe Moloch like a deity, while others seem to focus on the act of sacrifice itself. Traditional biblical view for Moloch was that Moloch was a pagan god associated with child sacrifice. The scholarly linguistics view is that MLK refers to a sacrificial ritual, not a god. Then you have the hybrid theory, which believes that Moloch started as a ritual, but later became personified as a god in Israelite writings. Now, archaeological evidence for human sacrifice in the Levant is more scarce and debated compared to North Africa, where Carthage was, in the Western Mediterranean. However, there are a few key sites that suggest human sacrifices may have been practiced in the Levant, though not on the same scale as in Carthage. The site of Amman, which is Rabat Amman in Jordan, it could have been a possible infant sacrifice. And that would be the Ammonites who did that. Now, excavations in Amman, the ancient capital of the Ammonites, reveal burials of infants and children in jars. Some scholars propose these could be sacrificial offerings similar to the Carthaginian Tophits. The Ammonites worshipped Milcom, which is could possibly be who was mixed up with Moloch. All right, a god sometimes linked to child sacrifice, like I was discussing just now. Um, this site could be a cemetery though for high infant mortality rates as well, rather than a ritual sacrifice. That's something that's being debated right now. They're discussing if this could actually have been a cemetery for like high infant mortality rather than a ritual sacrifice. And it also opens up another area that they've been discussing too. Even if they were sacrificing babies, were these babies actually sacrificed as live sacrifices, or were they babies who died from childbirth? You know what I mean? So there's a whole nuance to this whole debate going on, and when it comes to the Jewish people, I mean, I'm pretty sure they did not agree with cremation whatsoever. You know what I mean? So there is a good chance that these could have been dead babies that were being cremated rather than living babies. You know what I mean? So that was something too that I noticed in a lot of the writings that I ran across where they were talking about that as well. Now, could a cemetery for high infant mortality could it be a cemetery for high infant mortality rather than a ritual sacrifice? Well, that's the question. Then after that, you come to Gezer, which is in Israel, and there it shows evidence of possible human sacrifices, and that would have been the Canaanites between the 18th and the 16th century BCE. Now, in Gezer, a Canaanite city, archaeologists discovered buried infants beneath houses and city gates. They also found a severed child skull and remains of an adult near a ritual site. There was also a roll of standing stones, which is called masabat, that may have been used for cultic rituals as well. Now, this is something too that I wanted to bring up because I noticed this being brought up when it comes to these sacrifices all the time. And it seems odd to me that they bring it up in these particular situations, but like they don't, or archaeologists for some reason don't seem to do the same thing when it comes to other regions like the Assyrians or the Sumerians. In the Middle East, it was traditional for babies and adults to be buried under their houses, beneath their houses. That was where they buried their dead. It was right under their houses, under the floorboards or the floor. I don't even think they had floorboards back then. They just dug a hole, put the body in, and buried it right there within their house. So that was common practice. The bodies underneath the wall, I could see that happening if well, later on down here is where they get into it. So I'll just keep that going. The whole thing about that, I'll just keep reading before I get there. I don't want to start talking about it. But anyhow, I just finished about the role of standing stones, the masabats, that may have been used for cultic rituals. Now, some scholars believe that the buried children were foundation sacrifices, often made when buildings when building important structures. Others argue they were just infant cemeteries. Um, and Later on, I thought they would be talking about that, but and I brought up the issue too, is if maybe they were, just infant cemeteries, and I checked it out in Carthage. And from what I've gotten, there was a difference between burial ceremonies in Carthage compared to what they found at the Tophids when it came to Tanit in Baja. So that is a very, very that could be credible. There could have been human sacrifice or child sacrifices taken on there. Um, but here in Israel, I'm not sold on it so much. You know what I mean? That's just my take on it. It just seems like with all the stuff that I've been reading, I've been hearing examples of this place could have had child sacrifices taking place, and this place over here could have had child sacrifices. And then they always refer back to Carthage. Like, this is validated because we have more evidence here in Carthage. Well, that doesn't make sense because the Levant is a long, long way from northwest Africa and the Western Mediterranean. Okay? These weren't even the same group of people. These were more people who were up around the northwestern part of Africa, and in Spain and southern France and even Italy. Okay, back during that time period, it would have been Phoenician territory and Crete and islands like that. This is where all that was taking place. So I've been noticing how they want to try to, whoever or is doing this, they seem to always try to say, well, we don't have very much evidence here, but it's been found out that here in Carthage, like, it justifies their idea that this was taking place in the Levant, and I see that all the time. And it wasn't even the same time period. So, and that's just my perspective of it. If you go through and you read this stuff, you'll always see where they always want to bring Carthage up as an example. You know, I believe what it is they're trying to prove something with weak evidence, and they're trying to use something with more stronger evidence to validate their claims. That's just the way I'm seeing it from that way. So after that, I want to go to Megiddo and Ta'anak, which is in Israel. Now, there's possible ritual sacrifices there, and this was during the Bronze Age uh, by the Canaanites, and that would be right around 2000 BCE. Now, excavations at Megiddo and Ta'anak uncovered human remains buried under temples, infants and children or child remains mixed with animal bones, possibly from burnt offerings. There was supposed to be mass graves near cultic sites. And some scholars argue this represents ritual killings, while others suggest it was war-related massacres. And that's also something that I found out that's what I wanted to hold out for when it comes to the wall, the ritual, sacrifices and foundation sacrifices is what they called it. They could have possibly been from massacres during battles, because it was almost like a trophy for these kingdoms if they were to raise the walls of their enemies. You know what I mean? It's spoken about all throughout history, raising the walls of your enemies and things of that nature. So, um, yeah, I can see where this could be something that is related to battles that took place and had been killed. Um, Now, I don't know any more than what these people do. But I can tell you it from what I've read. Yeah, it could have very well have been war-related massacres that took place there, because that was one big thing that happened. They would um, they would destroy the walls. Usually, whenever those walls were raised again, or the bodies would have been buried underneath it, as a ceremonial thing, maybe. But it could be a possibility. Now, the Tophet like cemetery at, uh, at Escalon, which is uh, the Philistines between 1200 and 600 BCE, is another one. The cemetery of infant burials was found in Ascalon, a major Philistine city. Many of the infants were cremated and placed in urns, similar to Carthaginian Tophets. And here they call it Tophin-like cemeteries, but just to be clear, there was never any Tophets discovered in the Levant up to this time period. Okay, and that's what they refer to it as, Tophin-like cemeteries. You know, and if you get into Carthagin and you read about that, they want to make it very distinct. There's a difference between a Tophet and a cemetery. Okay, there's a very big uh, difference between them. And here in the Levant, they want to say Tophin like cemetery. So it's a play on words, at least in my opinion, for that. That's my observation of it. Um, some researchers propose these were child sacrifices to a Philistine deity, but others argue they were just high status infant burials. Um, Now, after that, you have Kidian, which is in Cyprus. That's a Levantine connected site with possible sacrificial evidence, and that is in 800 BCE. Um, uh, the Phoenician colony in Cyprus uh, had a Tophet style burial ground again. You know, similarities were there between Carthage's child sacrifice sites. So that's what they talk about right there. And also, they found urns containing cremated infants and animals, possibly indicating ritual sacrifice. Now, this was the strongest link to Phoenician sacrificial practices, but it's also outside of the Levant proper. Just so you guys know, this isn't in the Levant. And see, that's the one thing that I ran into, and I found out, like, they are making these claims that these people were being sacrificed within the Levant, and that there's 100% proof that it is, and it's not. You know what I mean? Um, they haven't found any Tophets whatsoever within the Levant in the Phoenician homeland. Now, they found them in Carthage. You know, they also found them in, like I said, the Western Mediterranean, on Crete and Italy and Spain and areas like that. But they haven't found any Tophets, any actual Tophets in the Levant or the Anatolian Peninsula. So just want to say that. Now, compared to Carthage, Levantine evidence is more ambiguous. There are infant burials, cremations, and ritual remains, but not all scholars agree they were sacrificial. Possible foundation sacrifices, burials under structures, uh, and wartime executions exist, but mass ritual killings, like in Carthage, are not definitely proven. Now, archaeological evidence for human sacrifice in the Levant is more scarce and debated compared to North Africa, which is where Carthage is, and the Western Mediterranean. However, there are a few key sites that suggest human sacrifices. Many have been practiced in the Levant, though not on the same scale as in Carthage. The site of Amman, like I said, with they call it Rabat, Amman, Jordan. Um, Now, this used to be the ancient capital of the Ammonites, um, and I've heard people making claims to this. Now, um, I'm not. I haven't pinpointed any kind of scripture that specifically says the Ammonites um, committed human sacrifice or child sacrifice, or however you want to call it. I've yet to find that. So if anybody knows of where it specifically says that the Ammonites committed human sacrifices, let me know if you can. But I've yet to find anything in the Bible that says that. So I know that they mention. Um, I know they mention Moloch. They mention Mesha, the Misha Stele, and the Misha Stele is Kamesh, or Kamesh, which is Moabite. Now that one is more aimed towards uh, battle, like being victorious in battle, and they did what they called divine destruction, which I had discussed earlier. Now the Ammonites, they worshipped Milcom, and he was the Ammonite deity. Um, Now you might wonder who Milcom was, but I can go through that here in a little bit. Give me a second. I have got to do something real quick. Yeah, sorry, I had to step away. It was good that I did that anyhow because it gives me a chance to stop and check and see if anybody's made any comments. All right, so we don't have anything at the moment, which is good. That means I can continue and get through this. Um, like I said, I did want to go through this in another episode. I guess this is the best time to do it um, because um, well, it's just the best time, I guess. But where I left off was who was Milcom. Okay, Milcom is spelled Milcom or Milkom. but Milcom is what the deity's name was for the Amorites. He was the Amorite national deity, basically. And the Amorites were people who lived east of ancient Israel in present-day Jordan. Now, Milky is often associated with Moloch or Moloch in the biblical texts and is thought to have been a god of war, kingship, and possibly the underworld. Now, the name Milcom may derive from the root MLK, meaning king or ruler, similar to other West Semitic deities. And this is where MLK comes into play. Like, there's different meanings for it. It could be king or ruler as well, which is MLK, which was what I was talking about with rituals. That's what they use for that. Now, biblical references to Milcom can be found in 1 Kings 11:5, 7, and 33, which describes how King Solomon built high places for Milcom. I was mentioning that before, as a part of his foreign wives' influence, which is considered an act of apostasy for the Jewish people. Then he's also mentioned again in 2 Kings 23:13 during King Josiah's religious reforms, where King Josiah destroyed the high places where Milcom was worshipped. Then you had Zephaniah 1:5, which condemns those who swear by both Yahweh and Milcom, indicating continued syncretism between Yahweh worship and Milcom's cult. Now, the Ammonites' inscriptions on the Tel Saran bottle, which was between 8th and 7th century BCE, includes references to Ammonite kings and their devotion to Milcom. This confirms Milcom's importance in Ammonite religion. Now, in Assyrian records, Milcom is indirectly mentioned through reference to Ammonite rulers who had names incorporating the divine element MLK. Now, the Bible suggests a link between Milcom and human sacrifice, though direct archaeological evidence is limited. In Leviticus 18:21, 22 through 5, it warns against giving children to Moloch, MLK, which is sometimes identified with Milcom. Now, these passages imply a practice of child sacrifice, though scholars debate whether this refers to a specific ritual or broader devotion. Now, in 2 Kings 23:10, it describes the destruction of Tophet in the valley of Hinnom, where children were burned as offerings. While often linked to Moloch, some scholars suggest it could also relate to Ammonite religious practices. In Jeremiah 49:1 through 3, it mentions Malcolm as a prophet against Ammon, but does not explicitly mention him. It doesn't explicitly mention human sacrifices. Although the Bible associates Milcom with forbidden practices, no direct archaeological evidence confirms human sacrifice to Milcom specifically. However, given the broader Semitic context, where neighboring cultures such as the Moabites, which worship Chemosh, and Phoenicians, which worship Baal, Haman, and Tanit, had sacrificial elements, it is possible that similar practices existed in Ammonite religion. Now, Malcolm was the chief god of the Ammonites, associated with kingship and possibly war. Biblical texts suggest Malcolm worship included forbidden rituals, possibly child sacrifices, though direct evidence is lacking. The Tel Saran inscription confirms Malcolm's religious importance among the Ammon. Um, Now, the Bible groups Malcolm with Malek, which is strongly associated with child sacrifice. But I want to also say that the exact connection is actually, it remains debatable. So that's something that I did want to go over when it comes to Malcolm. So just before I do that, I did want to cover him before I went on further. Now, Ammon, like I said, was the ancient capital of the Ammonites. And they did reveal burials of infants and children in jars. Okay, but that was pretty much it. They said that there was a Tophet-like cemetery, and that was basically what they came up with. They did find dead babies and things of that nature, though. But again, they always go back to Carthaginian Tophets. You know what I mean? They'll bring it up and then they'll say, "But over here, the Carthaginians did it," you know. And that kind of raises my suspicion when it comes to that. Now, if he was involved in child sacrifice, I couldn't tell you. To be honest with you, like I said, I haven't found much saying that that is the truth. I've found absolutely nothing that directly says that the Ammonites practiced human sacrifices. Me and Hi Tran even went over the Ammonites last year in the final episode of my Ancient Histories stream. So, and that was something that I'm pretty sure we would have. I think maybe we went into a little bit of it, but that was about it. We may have. I'm editing now, getting it all organized to put out, but I don't know for sure if we did or not. So, I apparently lost track of where I'm at. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether Moloch or Molech is a real deity or just a misinterpretation of the term MLK, which appears in ancient inscriptions. So let's break this down carefully, all right? The name Moloch appears in the Hebrew Bible as a deity associated with child sacrifice, but scholars disagree on whether Moloch was a real god worshipped in the ancient Near East, a term for a specific type of child sacrifice ritual, rather than a deity. A later biblical misunderstanding or polemic against foreign practices, or a little bit of all of it, you know. In Carthaginian and Phoenician inscriptions, the term MLK frequently appears in association with Tophets, cemeteries containing the cremated remains of infants and animals. Some argue that MLK stands for Molk sacrifice, a type of dedicatory offering rather than the name of God. The Greek and Roman writers, like Diodorus Siculus, claim the Carthaginians sacrificed children to Baal Haman and Tanit, but they never mention a god named Moloch. Because of this, some researchers believe the Bible misunderstood MLK as the name of a god rather than a sacrificial term. Milcom, who is the deity we just covered, is another deity confused with Moloch. Milcom or Milcom was the national god of the Amorites, mentioned in the Bible alongside Chemosh, the Moabite god. And you can find him in 1 Kings 11:5 and 7, where Solomon followed Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. Now, some scholars believe Milcom and Moloch might have been the same deity, or at least confused over time. The biblical text treats Moloch like a foreign deity that Israelites were forbidden from worshiping. However, no direct archaeological evidence, like a statue, inscription, or temple, proves the existence of a god named Moloch. Instead, the term MLK appears in Phoenician and Punic texts, likely referring to a type of ritual rather than a god. The Greek and Romans describe child sacrifice in Carthage, describe child sacrifice in Carthage to Baal-Hamon, a god not named Moloch. Most likely, Moloch was not a specific god, but a biblical reinterpretation or polemic against child sacrifice. The MLK inscription in Carthage probably refers to a ritual, milk sacrifice, rather than a deity. Now, Milcom, the Ammonite god, may have contributed to the confusion, leading to Moloch as a named deity in later traditions. Later Jewish, Christian, and medieval sources demonized Moloch, turning him into a fury god of child sacrifice. But this is likely a later mythologization. I can't say those big words. Now, there is some archaeological evidence that suggests human sacrifices may have taken place in the valley of Gehenna, also called the Valley of Ben Hinnom, in ancient times, though the evidence is debated and not universally accepted. Now, Gehenna, located just outside the walls of Jerusalem, is traditionally linked to the practice of child sacrifice in the Bible, especially in connection with the worship of Moloch. Now, in the 1950s and 1960s, archaeologists discovered infant burial sites in the Gehenna Valley that contain remains of young children. These remains were found in urns, often associated with cremation or burnt offerings, similar to practices seen in other ancient cultures like Carthage. The way the remains were arranged and the burnt nature of the bones raised questions about whether these were ritualistic sacrifices rather than simple burials. Some archaeologists have linked the Gehenna Valley burials to a Tophet-like burial ground, similar to what has been found in Carthage, where infants were cremated as part of religious offerings. The Tophet in Carthage is widely considered to have been a sacred site where children were sacrificed to Baal or Baal-Hamon and Tanit, his consort. So the discovery of similar patterns in Gehenna raises the possibility of similar practices in Judah. Now, Tophet-like cemeteries are also found in other Phoenician cities and these cities show signs of ritual child sacrifices too. The Gehenna Valley was a cultic site with evidence of altars and other features that may have been used for ritual purposes. Ancient Jerusalem's archaeological records suggest that sacrificial practices may have occurred there, particularly in relationship to deities like Baal and Moloch, as described in biblical texts. Some archaeological findings suggest that there were violent deaths or destruction of infants in the region. These could be linked to ritual killings. However, it is important to note that no definitive evidence of widespread human sacrifice, such as burnt offerings of children, has been found conclusively linked to Gehenna. While some scholars point to these findings as evidence of ritualistic practices, including child sacrifice, others suggest that they could have been non-sacrificial burials with high infant mortality rates, particularly among lower classes or as a response to disease or famines. The exact nature of these burials and the rituals associated with them remain debated. They remain debated. They haven't been debunked or said, no, that was false. They are still debated to this day. And they're also debating on the fact that maybe they weren't alive if they were used in rituals. Maybe they were like stillborn children and babies, or just babies, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So that's even a part of it too, which I have been reading a lot of. They even debate on that, if it was actually a sacrificial ritual. Were the babies actually alive? This portrayal that you see in a lot of these pictures of this demonic statue with horns and his arms held out, that just did not exist. And the reason why I say that for is they say, yeah, the Israelites would have destroyed it, but there would have been debris. If you sit and you pay attention to what archaeologists do on these sites, okay, they're very, very methodical. They will take dirt, put it over a freaking grade, and grade dirt so that they can get the soil out. And then they will take little brushes and they will sweep away freaking dirt off of artifacts. They're real methodical about this stuff, okay? And for me, I cannot see an archaeologist not finding small parts of a device like this that was set up. So in my mind, this is just my take on it. I don't believe that actually existed, and they found no evidence that it ever did. Not even in Carthage. So I just wanted to put that out there. That I do not believe one bit. So now, there are some archaeological evidence suggesting that human sacrifices may have occurred in the Gehenna Valley, particularly in the form of child sacrifice related to religious rituals. However, the evidence is not definitive and is interpreted differently by various scholars. The practice is often linked to Moloch worship as described in the Hebrew Bible, though it is not universally agreed upon as a clear-cut case of human sacrifices. Now, the Bible describes Moloch as a deity associated with child sacrifice, and you can find that in 18:21, 2 Kings 23:10, and Jeremiah 32:35. But does archaeology confirm the existence of Moloch idols? No definitive Moloch idol has been identified in Israel or nearby religions. Phoenician and Canaanite figurines of Baal and other gods have been found, but not specifically labeled as Moloch. Ammonite artifacts suggest worship of deities that could be linked to Moloch, but no distinct Moloch effigy has been recovered. Archaeological excavation in Gezer, Hazor, Megiddo, and Carthage have revealed bronze and clay figurines of deities worshipped by Canaanites and Phoenicians. Some depict horned gods or seated figures, possibly representing divine authority over fire and sacrifice. Carthaginian Tophets, burial sites for sacred children, contain stone stelae with inscriptions and symbols of deities that may be connected to Phoenician child sacrifice rituals. Some medieval and later sources, like rabbinic literature, describes Moloch idols as metal statues, possibly hollow, used for fire rituals. No such large metal statues have been found in Israel, Amman, or Phoenician colonies. However, altars, fire pits, and cultic remains associated with child sacrifice have been uncovered, and that would be in Carthage and Malta, indirectly supporting biblical accounts of Moloch-like practices. So this is what I'm talking about. They're trying to link biblical accounts to what took place in Carthage and Malta, which has absolutely nothing to do with what they're talking about. That's the one thing that I'm really talking about here. When it comes to the discussions I have, like it really seems odd that they're trying to do this, and they repeatedly do this. They always use Carthage as an example. Sometimes I'll hear about Malta. They'll use Crete as well. But even there, I mean, these were two separate deities. They weren't even a deity by the name of Moloch. You know what I mean? It was Baal Haman and his consort. It wasn't Moloch. So even there, there's nothing. It's not the same topic whatsoever. Now, biblical texts suggest Moloch worship was condemned and later purged, making it less likely that idols would be preserved. And I've already gone over that, where there would have been something. Entire freaking cities had been razed, and archaeologists have found remnants of them. So I don't buy into that.